Hello, I am Dr. Dave Donahue, and I am delighted to welcome you to the Health Rules podcast, where we try to give you the steps you can follow to achieve optimal health. Now, I can hear what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dave, does the world really need another health-related podcast? And the answer to that question is no. There's plenty of health-related podcasts out there, many of which are excellent, so I encourage you to check them out. But what we're doing here is a little different. This podcast is a working podcast. It is a podcast with a purpose, in which each episode we are building a health-related checklist. A checklist designed with all the steps that you should follow to achieve optimal health in a particular arena. So some examples. How can I reverse my hypertension? How can I prevent diabetes or reverse type 2 diabetes? I feel like I'm losing my memory. How can I preserve my memory and prevent Alzheimer's disease? I'm getting a lot of headaches or migraines. How can I prevent those? I want to prevent chronic kidney disease. I am worried about cancer. And how can I prevent cancer? I've been diagnosed with cancer. What are the steps that I can follow to maximize my survival? Or how can I live as long as possible? So we will cover a whole host of topics. And each episode, we will interview an expert in their field, someone who knows the science inside and out, someone who has been practicing in this field and has helped hundreds of people achieve the optimal outcomes themselves. So Health Rules will draw from the wisdom of allopathic, traditional medicine, and lifestyle and preventive medicine, as well as healthcare delivery science, which is a field that studies health interventions and determines what works and what doesn't work. And we will also draw from the wisdom of environmental science and sustainability medicine, which holds that the health of the individual, the health of the environment, and the health of the planet are intertwined. So our mission is to help people achieve the greatest health that they possibly can for themselves, for their loved ones, for their clients, for their patients, for the planet. Health Rules is brought to you by healthrules.org. We store the fruits of each interview on the website, on a page on healthrules.org. We will store the checklist itself. We will make available as well a printable version of the checklist, which you can post to remind yourself of how to achieve optimal results, and also that you can bring with you to a encounter with your doctor so that you can have a good discussion about all the important steps. So who am I? I am the host of Health Rules. My name is Dr. Dave Donahue. I am a primary care internal medicine physician, a fellow of the American College of Physicians. I'm also board certified in lifestyle medicine, and I am fully committed to the free and unbiased exchange of scientific and health information. I am excited that you have joined me on this journey. So on to our first episode. So this episode will be a little different because it will focus on the techniques that we can use to help others change their behavior to become more healthy. It is really aimed at caregivers or professionals who care for people who themselves want to achieve a better health outcome, who want to change their own behavior. So our guest is Dr. Howard Jacobson, PhD. Howard is one of my biggest influences in the podcast arena and in the how to live your best life arena and in how to be as healthy as possible arena. So Howard hosts one of my very favorite podcasts called the Plant Yourself podcast. And what an amazing resource that podcast is. I have found that there's no better way to learn so many intricate pieces of information about how we can achieve our best health, how we can achieve our best life. And the podcast, I have to say, is refreshingly free of commercial influence, and that's something I really value. Howard has authored numerous books, including one of my personal favorites, Proteinaholic, with Dr. Garth Davis, a book called Whole with Dr. T. Colin Campbell. More recently, he's written books called Use the Weight to Lose the Weight with Josh Lajani and Sick to Fit with Josh Lajani. So since I have been personally coached by Howard. I can vouch that he is a sensitive and gifted coach who has gone deep into the science of behavior change. In his practice, he has coached thousands of people, and he has coached other coaches to help people learn how to overcome almost any kind of barrier and achieve their best. So let's get started. Dr. Howard Jacobson, welcome to the Health Rules podcast.
Dr. David Donahue, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we would love to hear so much from you. We're extremely excited to have you on the podcast today. I, as you know, enjoy talking to you under any circumstances. So a podcast, hey, why not? If you could, tell us about your journey.
Which journey?
Tell us the whole epic saga. No, I mean, in 2.5 minutes or less. No, you have a little bit more than that. But tell us your story. How did you come to arrive at where you are now, and who is the person you've become?
Okay, so I see myself as a behavioralist, and I'm not sure if that's behaviorist or behavioralist. So I kind of slur it when I speak. I have spent my professional life trying to figure out how to help people do the things that they kind of want to already do and aren't. So I'm not interested in sort of like, half Nelson persuasion of people who simply don't want to agree with me. I'm not into manipulation or bullying, but people who say, I'd really like to eat healthier. I'd really like to stop having so much sugar. I'd really like to start an exercise habit. I want to be a meditator. And they don't do it. And that's where I've devoted my professional life and most of my personal life as well to cracking that nut. And of course, I had to do it first for myself, and I'm still doing it for myself because I don't think there's any there. There's just, continual chasing of a congruence between aspiration and identity.
And so how would you describe what it is you're doing right now with yourself?
So right now I coach people individually and in groups, and I teach coaching to essentially a plant-based community. So there's a whole plant-based community that wants to be health coaches, and the only options out there are kind of antithetical to plant-based, sort of, IIN, 200 different diets, and they're all good, or other programs that don't focus on the specifics. So it's kind of a safe place for plant-based people to congregate, but also it's a coaching model that's based on different things than sort of the life coaching that I see out there in terms of, in your world, the coaching is essentially motivational interviewing. Right? Like that's what doctors and health professionals are taught. And it's a really useful tool in the same way that a flathead screwdriver is a really useful tool, but I wouldn't use it for everything.
So you're going to get an opportunity today to tell us all about the Phillips head equivalent of counseling.
Phillips head, what's that? The hexagonal,
wow.
Allen wrenches, torques.
Even maybe electronic versions thereof.
Yep, turbocharged with those 20 volt yellow and black batteries. Absolutely.
All right, so I am excited. Well, I'd like to share here at the outset, because in a couple of minutes we're going to get into the dirty little business of building out a checklist. So if you don't mind, I'd like it if you could share with us here at the beginning, what are your current things that you want people to know about, and how can people get in touch with you?
Okay, this is good. So to get this out of the way before we get so hot and heavy into nerd science that we forget later.
Right.
So I have a podcast called Plant Yourself. I think that's how you and I met.
Yes,
and you are one of my favorite guests on that podcast. And
I highly recommend it. I love the podcast.
I learned a tremendous amount from you. I'm blanking on the number. I think it might be one. I can't remember. There's a 5 in it. 155 or 250. Depends what year it was. but you were one of my favorite guests, and I love how you applied a scientific, skeptics, systems-oriented brain to behavior change, and that actually helped me a lot in refining my own thinking about what works. It was, so I really want to thank you for that. That was kind of a turning point for me in terms of, hey, I've got all this groovy stuff to let's assess it rigorously and create systems out of it.
Oh my gosh, you're over the top, Howie.
So this is full circle.
This is version 2.0 of that interview, perhaps. But you're now up to how many episodes?
I just recorded number 443 an hour ago, so that will be arriving next week. And so I talk with thinkers, researchers, inspiring people, basically anybody I want to have a conversation with. So like I am my audience, and like if I want to get on the phone with somebody for an hour, who would it be? And then if they say yes, we make it happen.
Nice. Well, I can certainly vouch that it's a powerful experience, and something about that magical Howard Jacobson skill set, and maybe it's your dulcet tones or your voice, or I don't know what it is, but you have a great style for interviewing, and you're very much my mentor in this journey.
Wow. Well, I'm happy to be dull set.
You never miss an opportunity to self-deprecate. I've noticed that about you too, Howie, and that's one of the things we all love about you.
Well, yeah, I've hired, I have a whole anti-marketing department.
Right. You have taken that that's what your PhD must be in, right? So I wanted to, very soon, again, we're going to get very into the dirty business of building out a checklist. But before we get there, unrelated to that checklist, I want to ask you one unrelated question. What is one important secret to good health that you have discovered that almost nobody else knows?
I don't think I've discovered anything that everybody doesn't know. Like I trade in the obvious, which is another form of anti-marketing. Because if I tell people I have a secret that no one's ever heard of, everybody wants it. If I say, eat your friggin' broccoli, take a walk every day, and think good thoughts, like, okay, yeah, well, I've heard that. So I can honestly say I have no secrets whatsoever.
Okay, you're
that's my secret.
There it is. It's all in plain sight. I love it. Well, we are going to build a checklist. Can you tell me what checklist we're going to build today?
Well, you tell me if this is going to work. I was thinking about a checklist for health professionals, for people who, when someone comes in and you want to help them change.
Okay, I'm taking notes. Checklist for health professionals. For those of us who are health professionals, how can we more effectively help somebody change?
Yeah, so if you are a pill prescriber, you give someone a script, they go get it filled or not, they take it or not, and you've done your job. Oh, right? Yeah. You get reimbursed for the visit. You get better health grades scores if you give people drugs.
Right.
Right. So that's easy. So if you are a surgeon, the person is probably anesthetized in front of you. They have no agency in this operation. You go, you cut, you move, you sew, you remove, and they're done.
All using that standard head screwdriver, right? Very handy device we find in medicine.
Yeah, well, with surgery, I think you want one with the right angle.
Oh, okay, a little curve. Okay.
Right. But if you're a lifestyle medicine practitioner and the largest part of your work is getting people to change their diet, change their movement habits, change their sleep patterns, change their relationship to stress, then it's all on them. You can't follow them home and knock cheeseburgers out of their hand. You can't go to the gym and lift weights for them. It's all on them. And you are essentially powerless. And it's really important to recognize that you're powerless, because that's not a comfortable position for physicians, is it?
Absolutely not. We we do not like feeling powerless. There's 10 ways to feel powerful.
Okay.
So
But
this is great. I love where you're taking this. Go ahead, please.
right. So what we can't have power over, but we can have power with and power for. So we can empower the people in our care who come to us and say, hey, I want to be healthier. And we know that there is a path for them, and we want to lay it out for them and support them as they take tentative step after tentative step on that path until it becomes their identity and they don't need us anymore.
Yeah. Amen. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So you're going to tell us the steps of how we Luddite and dullard healthcare providers can sort of try to begin to do the kindergarten version of what you're able to achieve.
All right. Well, I would, I think I would phrase it more generously. Like, if I'm in the ER after an accident, I don't want the doctor to come up to me and say, "So tell me about, were you meditating while you were driving?" Like, I just want them to get the steering wheel out of my sternum. So,
Right.
this is all bonus work for the medical professions.
What title are we going to give this checklist?
I don't know, health behavior change checklist. We can change it, right?
We sure can. So let's start with that.
Yeah, and that's a really important first step, is that everything we're doing with our patients, we can change. So this checklist is not a here's how you do it. It's here's how you approach it, because you're going to hit dead ends with them. They're going to hit dead ends with themselves. And one of the most important things we're trying to model is that experimental willingness, is the willingness to try things, be wrong, and learn from them the way a true scientist would. Because people come to us, and I don't know if this is going to be part of, it'll be part of the discussion of the checklist. I don't know if this is the place to start, but just as a framework, when people come to us to change their health behaviors, they've already failed.
Sure.
They already think of themselves as damaged, wrong, broken, unworthy in some pretty significant ways. Right? So they come in with shame. And they come in with a story, and the story is something like, Doc, you might be my last chance. I've tried Atkins. I've tried Hollywood Cookie. I've tried Weight Watchers. I've tried Planet Fitness. Nothing sticks.
Right.
And so what we know is the next time they make the slightest mistake, they're going to tell themselves a story of, oh, well, another thing failed. So from the very get-go, we want to model that this is all an experimental process. This is all a learning experience. There is no failure as long as there is learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good message, and a good thing to keep in mind. I think that a lot of us docs, myself included, feel like we're in the business of pontificating. Come in and we will mostly pontificate through the pen. The pen is mightier than the sword, and writing out a prescription. But when we do converse with a patient, we're to give them their money's worth. We've got to push information out at them, and don't pay too much attention to their mental state or how they're receiving it or their sense of self-esteem. So that's powerful to keep that in mind from the outset.
Right.
So
And yeah,
go ahead. Please.
Well, so like here, I'm hoping that we can collaborate on this, because I feel like I have some expertise in the topic and you're the checklist expert. So I don't know that I prepared in terms of steps, but I would love your help in sort of translating the methodology into like checklist poster form. So let's see if we can do that together.
Let's do it.
So someone comes to you, and I don't know if it's the doctor, or it might be, you might have health coaches in your office or registered dietitians, but someone in a lifestyle medicine practice is going to have to be responsible for talking to the patient about changes that they're going to make in their life.
Mhm.
So at that point, when the person comes in, the first thing we want to know is kind of where they at, right? Because some people come in as like droopy house plants. Like, you ever have a house plant and you're like, oh, I didn't water this thing in like 4 days or 2 weeks, and it's like, okay, the leaves are droopy, they're starting to turn brown, they're turning papery. Like, just give them water. That plant would love water, right? Like, some people, like, what they need is information. They've never heard of the idea that, let's say, a plant-based diet can help them lose weight, or that walking is a great first step for exercise. And, they've thought, well, what I've got to do is, sweat till I fall on the ground, or work out really hard in the gym. And anything that feels good, walking, gardening, dancing, is obviously not going to help. So we want to find out, as a first step, like, what do you know? Like, okay, here's this goal. What do you know about what to do? Because, if I'm telling you something you already know, if you're friends with me, you're going to interrupt me. If you're not friends with me, you're just going to silently tune out or get annoyed.
Good point. Yes. So step one is basically find out where are you at, and ask the question, what do you know what to do?
Yeah, if they've got pre-diabetes, what's your understanding of pre-diabetes, and what are ways that you could address it? Do you have a sense of that? What are you thinking?
Okay, what is your understanding of blank, whatever the topic of interest? In your own words, tell me what it means to have diabetes, like you just said. Okay,
Yeah, and you're always asking from a position of curiosity, because there's a way in which, like, if someone's just looking at the words, they could ask it like a teacher wanting the correct answer, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
97% of us hated school. So anything that brings us back to Mrs. Hunt's fourth grade class is gonna get our neurology into fight or flight.
You had her too. She was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think it might have been my fault too, looking back, but
so approach with curiosity. Yeah, so that's good advice. So that's a good step one right there. Assess where they're at.
yeah, because it'll it's respectful. So the whole thing here, like, we are just dripping with respect and empathy. Right. So the checklist is one thing, but the spirit behind it is really important, that we are respectful of them, which means we totally respect their autonomy. We don't think, oh God, like, we can have a thought like, oh God, like, why are they so stupid? How could they not know this? Or, look, they said they knew that eating meat was bad, but they're still eating meat. What's wrong with them? So all of these reactions are our garbage.
Right.
And we're going to have those thoughts. It's fine to have the thoughts. Like, I'm not saying, become the Dalai Lama, but I'm saying, like, first of all, prepare yourself and think about for yourself, like, what you want for this person.
Right.
So I'm writing a book on coaching right now, with my coach, teacher, and mentor, Peter Bregman. And one of the titles we're playing with is something about from critic to ally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important, because people, they feel criticized, and they're criticizing themselves, and their spouses are criticizing them. And when they walk down the street, people are looking at them and criticizing with their eyes and maybe with actual words. So it's really important for us to come in as their ally. We are here to help them, support them, and there is no criticism, blame, judgment whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So this checklist goes beyond just how am I going to get behavior change. I think some of this is really sage advice for any provider. I have to reflect that when I went through my medical education, there was a lot of sort of disdain for patients, these patients who have these chronic diseases, and they don't take care of themselves, and they won't take care of themselves. But at the same time, it's not like we were dishing out very actionable steps or information on how to take care of yourself. So there was just sort of embedded in the culture a little bit of an undercurrent of disdain.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why. So just give me your blink. If you were to give Western medicine a grade from A to F on how it deals with chronic disease, what would you say?
C.
C.
And that might be generous.
Might be generous. Yeah, it's generous. Right? Barely passing.
Yeah. D perhaps. I mean,
I think.
yeah. And I think where you're going at is the fact that we seldom reach attempt to reverse the underlying cause of chronic disease.
Yeah, nope. Where I'm going with it is if you are getting a D, your natural inclination is to feel bad about yourself.
Right.
But you don't want to feel bad about yourself. And the easiest way to not feel bad about yourself is to blame somebody else.
Okay.
So one of the nice things about practicing lifestyle medicine is that you can actually get to the root causes, as you were saying. And so you could get a B or an A, which means you have less to defend.
Right. True.
Right? You're actually pretty good at this. Like, when you reach my level of expertise, you can self-deprecate all the time.
Well, I don't have the PhD yet in that, so I defer to you, the king of self-deprecation.
See, I don't know if I just like obnoxiously complimented myself or self-deprecated again. I don't even know.
So this is kind of number 2, right? Is this total respect for their autonomy?
Well, I don't know if it's a step, because I was thinking about this. Like, if we were to create a checklist for getting someone to marry you, and the checklist was like, invite them out and, buy a ring, go down on your one knee, discuss children, discuss pets. Like, the steps are kind of meaningless without the spirit behind them.
Well, but another way to think about this particular checklist, there's different kinds of checklists, and some are a list of things you're going to do, and some of them might be more of a gut check. Okay, let me do a status check on myself, and
oh yeah, beautiful.
Before I go in the room, let me make sure that I'm gonna assess where they're at, and that's a thing I'm gonna do. But it's also, let me go in with curiosity. So like put myself in a curious mindset, and step 2 is I don't judge. So I'm non-judgmental. So number 1 is curiosity. Step number 2 is non-judgmental.
Right. So with that, and your curiosity is going to be of a specific kind. And the curiosity, I think, is the most effective. You're going to hear their barriers to change, right? If they have no barriers to change, you're done in 2 minutes. And you've had people like that, and I've worked with people like that. They say, "Hey, eat a plant-based diet." And they go, "Oh, really? Is that it?" And they go off and they do it. And like, they send you a picture of their pantry the next day. They threw everything out, and they're like, like miracle conversions, like Saul on the road to Tarsus. Like, and you're like, okay, I live for this, right? Sure. Like there's lots of stories of like Caldwell Esselstyn talking to someone, and they're often being wheeled in for open heart surgery on the gurney, and like they say, "Oh, wait, I just talked to Essie. Turn me around. I want to try diet." Right.
Oh,
but for most of us, for most people, most of the time, there are barriers to change.
Sure.
Right. So that's kind of the work that we're going to do, is to explore those barriers to change. And we are going to see them in as positive a light as possible. So I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of the checklist, but my curiosity is, I don't know if you have any sort of bad habits that you'd want to change, or if you do, if you'd want to share them right now.
Myself. Okay, chocolate, dark chocolate.
Okay.
It's not a major struggle, but it's something I'm trying to get away from, and not because of so much because of the nutritional aspect, but it is a rich source of saturated fat, but because of the stimulatory effects I'm very sensitive to, so it disrupts my sleep. So
okay,
trying to get away from dark chocolate.
Okay, so my curiosity, even before we start talking about it, like where my GPS is orienting, is like, you already know what's bad about dark chocolate, right? Stimulant effect. Maybe if you have it, you want more of it, and it becomes like a little struggle. And like, you want, you're this avatar of lifestyle medicine, and you've got this little secret thing you're struggling with, and like what, right? You know all the negatives.
Right.
So here, motivational interviewing would do this. It would say, well, tell me why do you want to why would you want to give up chocolate? What's your future if you keep eating it? What's your future if you don't? And it's really to establish, like, you're going to talk yourself into not having the chocolate. I want to do something different, because none of that is addressing where you're stuck, right? So my curiosity is, what's good about the dark chocolate for you? What positive functions does it serve? How do you feel when you have it? How do you feel when you think about having it? How do you feel when you buy it? How do you feel 10 minutes later? What is it doing for you? And now, we're starting to appreciate that it has a positive intent. And then we can start talking about how you could get that in other ways, right? If it's, it's a pick-me-up, but you want to be stimulated without having a stimulant. So can we do that through a type of breathing exercise? Could you do it by, subscribing to a Comedy Central YouTube channel and watching a 5-minute stand-up set?
Right.
Could you do it by watching clips of the 1992 Ultimate Frisbee, World Championships?
Right.
So that's the essence of the curiosity.
Yeah.
It's important because it goes back to respect, because you are a smart guy. You're one of the smartest guys I know. If you're eating chocolate, it's not because you're stupid. It's because you're smart. It's because you're doing something that benefits you. The issue is that it's a suboptimal way to fill that need, because it comes with costs that you're finding unacceptable.
Got it. There's some interesting things in there. The positive aspects of the habit that we want to change. It's not something that doctors and providers necessarily do easily, especially when you're talking about something like smoking to someone who is a non-smoker, or drinking to someone who's a non-drinker, or that delicious steak that I can't resist to someone who's been vegan for 10, 20 years. And so actually it kind of makes me think that maybe one of the items in this checklist should be to check yourself at the door, or this is not about you, and try to rise above that. There's research showing that doctors who are smokers do a poor job at counseling their smoking patients to quit, and doctors who are heavier do a poor job at counseling people with a body mass index lower than them to lose weight. And so similarly, I think we've got to remove ourselves and our own too much of our own baggage out of the equation, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I'm thinking now in terms of that sort of checklist rather than steps. So that's very empowering for me. I'd say first thing is, like, get present. So if you're a healthcare provider in an office setting or telemedicine, you're dealing with one person after another, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not in front of a patient, you got to deal with some effing, head of medical record keeping. You've got to file for insurance. You've got to, figure out how to fix the broken thing. Like, it's very easy, and, especially in an HMO world, to be like you're treating the chart, not the person. So to take a moment, if you're doing lifestyle medicine, you're dealing with people's lives, and you've got to be present for them and for the conversation. So I'd say the first part of the checklist is take a deep breath, feel your feet, let go of anything. Like, I got to remember to make this phone call, write it down. So it's not an open loop, right? Close your loops and get present. Then you want to think about the person and their best interests, like what you want for them.
Okay.
Assume positive intent, right? That's the 3 words that can prevent more divorces, unnecessary divorces, than anything else, according to research by John Gottman. Right? Assume positive intent about all their behaviors. because every dysfunctional behavior is a defense mechanism.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
You're trying to survive out on the savannah, and you're afraid of starving to death.
Yeah, and a lot of the people who come to us, who especially, let's say you're 100 pounds overweight or more, there is almost certainly trauma underlying that. Like you could be 40 pounds overweight because you love McDonald's. It's hard to be 100 pounds overweight unless your food is a serious solution to a completely unsafe internal environment. Right? Because you see people 100 pounds overweight, the minute they change their diet, the weight flies off at first.
Right.
Like the body doesn't want to be heavy.
Right. Yes. So those adverse events, thank you for bringing that up, Howie, because this is something that, again, we in medicine are not properly attuned to. They say that it takes, something like 30 years for a good idea to get out there into clinical practice. And this is one of the newer ideas. I mean, it maybe is not new for everybody, but I think medicine has recently been waking up to the importance of these adverse childhood events. I mean, the research is just stunning about what happens when somebody has had a certain number of adverse child events, and you can measure it in terms of likelihood of developing heart disease and earlier death. I mean, it's really a powerful influence in our overall health. So that's another thing that we should be kind of lurking in the back of our mind, is what's going on in this person's past, right? What are the dark events in their past that are shaping their current unhealthy behaviors, right?
Right. Well, I want people to be sensitive to it, but I would caution, unless you're a behavioral health person or a psychologist or some sort of therapist, to resist the temptation to go there. And there is a temptation to go there because we've seen movies like On Golden Pond, right? If you're of a certain age. And we're interested because it's like a puzzle, like we still have this Freudian paradigm. Like if they understood, if they could, get in touch with that thing that happened to them, then they'd be cured. And like there's value in that, but that's not our business. Our business is behavior change. And for a lot of it's not necessary to relive it or even to understand it. I think we'll get into this in a little while as part of the checklist, but the goal is to allow the person to feel what they're feeling and act anyway. So like to take your chocolate, your shameful chocolate habit.
Yeah, thanks, Howie. I appreciate bearing my soul and you're publicizing it.
Yeah. Luckily, you have your fingers on the edit button.
That's right. I'm going to strike
Right.
this whole conversation.
Yeah. So if you think about like a time when like like, all right, I'm going to eat the chocolate even though I don't really want to. Like part of my brain is like, this isn't good for me, and you're like, yeah, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you pause at that moment and just tune in, you will notice things. You will notice that the chocolate is about to serve a function of state change or state maintenance, right? Like you're going to feel sad or maybe a little bit ashamed about something. Like, oh, you know what? Even though I'm successful, I'm still kind of a fraud. Like I get that 5-6 times an hour, and I only self-deprecate one of those. So I'm like, I'm at a B- for keeping that in. Right. And recognizing, as we said, like the chocolate serving a purpose of protecting me from a feeling. Right. So whether or not that feeling came from, you were lost at the mall when you were 7, or you've had an abusive childhood, or a parent was neglectful and alcoholic, it doesn't really matter. What's like the doctor doesn't ask who shot the bullet. They just get the bullet out. Right. So what we want to say is like, okay, so there's a feeling. let's start doing tests and practices to more and more tolerate the feeling that arises that you solve with chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the extent, but understanding, when somebody fails, it's because their neurology is overriding their intellect. And that's true for all of us, right? You can't override with your brain. If someone comes up behind you.
Catch that? You can't override what with your brain?
You can't override a stress response, a fight or flight response with cognition. Okay. Right? If somebody in your office came up behind you right now and popped a water balloon or a balloon or made a loud noise with a paper bag, you would startle and jump.
Yep.
Right. So understand that when people are in the grip of a trauma that has been unresolved, their nervous system is going to override all of their strategic intentions.
Right.
And so just understanding that is the important thing, so that we don't judge and despair and oh, why is this person doing it? Can't they see how they're killing themselves?
Right. And the doctor is coming in the ultimate left brain state, to use a phrase, the ultimate cognitive state. They're all about what to-do lists and numbers and right there. What do we call it? System 2, right? Kahneman puts it, but the thinking brain. Whereas a lot of people who come to us, and whether it's doctors or providers or therapists or any kind of tradition in healthcare, is people are in a vulnerable state and they're thinking much more emotionally, right?
Yep, that we are. We're dealing with grayware. Right. It's not hardware, not software. It's humans.
It's grayware. Yes. It's
limited. Okay. So do you feel we've got the part of the checklist before you start the conversation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So then sort of the discussion, immediately into, so tell me what you know about X or about this condition. Is just sort of, just give me I don't know anything. Or, actually I'm a triple PhD in psychoneuroimmunology, and, if you talk down to me, I'm out of here and you'll never see me again. Right? Then the next thing I would want to know from them, and it's important to ask this in a totally neutral way, is what outcome they're looking for. What would you like to accomplish? Because too often in the medical profession, we tell them what the outcome is that they want.
Yep.
And then we do motivational interviewing to get them to agree with it.
Right. So the purpose, in a sense, their purpose in life,
it's just regarding this. What would you like? You're here. What would you like to accomplish working with us?
Yes.
Right. And you'll hear different things, and very often you'll hear unrealistic things, and mostly they're unrealistic in the direction of not bold enough, right? Because we know lifestyle medicine and they don't, and they've been told, well, you can't cure diabetes, you can't reverse diabetes, you're just going to be medicated. They've heard that, and then someone said, hey, why don't you see Dr. D of PhD, and all of a sudden, well, okay, but realistically, I'm not going to get rid of it. I can just, I'm hoping to manage it, maybe get off of, Byetta, and just, I'll be taking small amounts of insulin and whatever. And you're like, okay, so I understand that this person has an unrealistically humble or small view of what they can accomplish. So point to note, because if that's all they think they can do, they're only going to be motivated to do that.
Okay, interesting.
Right?
So you don't try to argue them out of that at this point.
No, depending. Like if it seems like they're pretty tentative about it, well, my doctor said that I was going to have this for life, or basically I'm going to have high cholesterol and I'm going to have to be on a statin and there's nothing I can do about it. But if they say like their doctor said or they heard, like you can sort of check in, like how much do they believe this and how much are they just sort of parroting what they've heard, right? Is it their identity or not? So if it's not their identity, you can say right now, and I would never argue, but I would say, actually, I have a different sense of what we can do together that might be even better than what you're suggesting. Would you like to hear it? Or would you be interested in me sharing it?
Okay, I have a different, not better, sense of what is possible.
Yeah, what might be possible for you, and it might be even better than what you're thinking. Would you? So I'm whenever I offer advice, or whenever I'm not in question mode, I'm always prefacing it with permission.
Yes. Okay. That's another powerful thing. So never offer advice without asking permission to offer the advice.
Right. So what I want to do in that step is to get them to an outcome that is possible, that they believe is possible, and that they want.
Yep.
So I think they can get there. They think they can get there, and it's a good place to go.
Okay. You've got them all the ducks lined up at that point.
Right. Because the more, like, if they realize, wow, I could get off my meds, I wouldn't have to have a CPAP for the rest of my life. Wow. Like, would you climb Everest for $100? Probably not. For $1 million, well, let me start practicing with supplemental oxygen. Right. So the biggest thing they can go for, and you're a doctor. I'm just a health coach. Like, you can wear a white coat and have a stethoscope as a prop, which means you're more credible than I am. So if you have the power when you say, hey, in my experience, I've worked with people who in worse conditions than you, and this is what they were able to accomplish, would that interest you? Right? They might say yes, or they might say, yeah, but what's it going to cost me? Right, in their mind.
Right. The skepticism.
Not just skepticism, but I don't necessarily know if I want to pay that price. I want to be happy. I'd rather be happy and sick than live for 100 years and be a monk. Right? People have stories. Right. So you don't want to create a future that's, that they are not willing to pay for behaviorally, experientially.
Sure.
Okay. So that's a bit of a dance, like to get you, and the nice thing is, if you're their physician or if they're it's iterative, right? Everything's iterative. So if you think all they want to do is lower their A1C to the point where they can get off this particular med that has nasty side effects for them, say, great, let's do that. Because the person who makes lifestyle changes to lower their A1C is a different person than the person who's in front of you right now. It's like you climb one mountain and then you can see the next one, but you couldn't see it from the ground, from the valley. So we're never pushing.
Right. Never pushing.
Right.
So we're offering opportunities that they're going to want to surmount.
Right. Because what happens when someone pushes us? We resist, right? We push back.
We do.
Right. So the first, when you're doing a bit of jujitsu there, they're like, wait, they're not telling me what to do. That's never happened before. They're not judging me. They're not telling me, they're not prescribing what I should do and making me feel bad for not having done it. Like, like people get a little off balance there and they become very open to new ways of being. So after outcome, I would want to ask about what's happening now. So tell me about your, the condition. Let's say, if it's diabetes, tell me what you're eating. Just give me a picture of what's going on for you in your life as relates to this issue, as relates to, like, what are you eating now? What does that look like? What's your exercise like? Whatever information you'd want to gather but not about chart information, but about human life information. The problem you have, what's the cost of it? Like, why is it a problem? Okay, my leg hurts. Okay, for some people, that's not a problem. For other people, they can't get down on the floor and play with their grandkids. They can't go dancing with their spouse, right? So sort of understand the problem from their life perspective.
Okay.
The third thing I want to know is, what have they tried?
Yes.
For a bunch of reasons. One, you kind of want to get a sense of, like, have they given up? Like, oh, I tried this. Like the way they tell you, I've tried everything, doc. Nothing's worked. Or, well, I did this diet. Oh, and then what happened? Well, I went out on New Year's Eve and got drunk and had 3 cheesecakes, and then I figured, oh, what the hell, right? So you're learning about how they self-sabotage, right? They're telling you their formula for failing, which is very helpful because when you reverse it and you point it out to them as a pattern, so it sounds like every time you have a slip up, you interpret that as you're done. Did you ever learn to play a musical instrument? Did you ever learn a sport? Did you ever learn to type? Did you ever learn to walk? Right? So you can get them to see that assumption is not universal. When I make a mistake, I have to quit. Right. So by asking, what have they tried? You're getting their map of success and failure. And often they'll tell you something that worked. Said, yeah, for 3 years, I was plant-based, I was running, I was doing yoga, it was great. Oh, yeah, and then they'll stop, they'll interrupt themselves and go, yeah, I just got to do that again. Mm-hmm. I stopped doing yoga when my DVD player broke. Literally, all I got to do is, go to Yoga with Adrian on YouTube, and I'll be like, yeah, that's all I need. Thanks, doc. See you next time. Right. So it can also be a very empowering question. But once you've got those 3 things, you got the outcome they want, what's going on now, and what have they tried in the past. You have a picture in your mind of what the gap is. Right. And now it's time to explore that with them. Right. So what you're looking for is, what's the opportunity in the problem? Right. So if your problem is you eat too much chocolate, we can try to solve it this way. We can say, okay, stop buying chocolate. Okay, where are you even getting the chocolate? Where is it in your house? What have you tried? Right. And so the answer is, all right, Dave, I want you to stop eating chocolate. Make a decision, make a rule, no more chocolate. Now, if people in your family eat chocolate, then you got to get one of those kitchen safes where they can open it and you can't. Right. Or they have to agree to eat it in the garage, not in front of you. And that's a way to solve your chocolate problem. But because we talked about earlier that your chocolate problem is actually an attempted solution for something else, we can try to solve a bigger problem that's actually going to enrich your life. It's an opportunity for something better. Like, yeah, you know what? I have chocolate as a stimulant because I'm tired by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, so why are you tired? Well, I've been staying up till midnight because I'm stressed out. I keep checking, news sites and blogs, and the world is scaring me. Okay, so now we're dealing with like a deep anxiety that's led to a behavioral issue that makes you tired, which you're trying to solve with chocolate. Right? So the opportunity to help you achieve calmness, peace, and equanimity in a troubling world is a much higher order problem than stopping you from having chocolate.
I love that. And that's similar to what you read about some of the management styles or such. And they talk about the 5 whys. And so you're supposed to keep asking the question, why? Well, why do you do this? Well, Why is it that way? Well, why? Ultimately arriving at the, sort of the hidden underlying cause of everything, right?
Right, right. And so, yeah, just like in lifestyle medicine, we're looking for root causes. We're also looking for root causes of behavior. And it's inevitable that when we drop down a level, so just like if you're saying, well, diabetes is because you have too much blood sugar, so you're eating too many carbs, so cut back on the sweet potatoes and the corn and the carrots and the fruit. And right, so we're not addressing the root cause, but when you address the root cause of insulin resistance, you solve a whole bunch of other problems too. You improve cardiovascular health, you improve immune function, you improve the diversity of the microbiome, right? You improve brain health, right? So in the same way, when we find a root cause issue that their behavior is trying to solve, we improve their life in multiple ways. Let's say the issue is you have chocolate because your spouse loves chocolate, and if you don't have it, she gets defensive and says, oh, come on, don't be a wuss, have a piece of chocolate. And so the issue then is standing up for yourself, right? If you're the sort of person who has trouble advocating for your needs and you're trying to please other people, which is very common when we talk about people with eating issues. Like, well, I went out to eat, I didn't want to trouble the server, all my friends had it, and like I just we go out to friends' house and I just don't want to make any trouble, and I don't ever like taking care of everyone but themselves. So instead of just addressing the behavior itself, we begin to look at what would it be like to, like, what's an experiment you could do to challenge the assumption that if I advocate for myself, no one will like me. If I advocate for myself, my wife is going to reject me. If I advocate for myself, it's going to be really awkward and I'm going to feel bad, right? Because as long as that's driving behavior, they're never going to try to change. So what you want to do is surface that assumption and then give them ways to test it. Like your assumption, if I don't have chocolate, I can't handle not having chocolate right now, right? And that's not you, but that's a lot of people when they're tempted in such a way, like there was no way I wasn't going to have the pizza. I know I shouldn't, but there's no, like, so the assumption embedded in that is I can't handle saying no to the pizza. So then we say, well, let's try an experiment. Can you try saying no to the pizza for 2 minutes?
Yeah, okay.
Right? You can have it after 2 minutes, but just see what happens when you say no to it.
So here we are, Howie, a couple months later. We had to break this interview up into a couple pieces. I will, if it's okay with you, I'm going to read you where we are now so we can finish up the checklist. Is that cool?
Yes, it is.
All right. So I have a title of How to Coach Effectively. I don't know what you think about that title.
Let's say how to effectively guide people to positive health changes,
All right, how to effectively
or to positive changes,
Okay.
or to make positive changes. I don't know.
All right.
Can run it by your marketing department.
All right. And then we have a little blurb at the beginning talking about how effective coaching does not come naturally to any of us, and clinicians are no exception. If behavior change were as simple as deciding what to do is best, there might be no such thing as obesity or heart disease. Most people who need coaching have already tried the easy solutions. They have already failed in any way they can imagine. They think of themselves as damaged and unworthy. They are primed for the next failure, wanting to kick themselves one more time and say, I told you so. What they don't need typically is to be, what I put here is mansplained or womansplained, or basically explained what to do. What they need is an empathetic health coach who can help them believe in themselves, execute on a credible solution, and achieve long-term results. This checklist should be followed by anyone who wants to effectively coach clients, friends, loved ones, or anyone else. Is that a decent preamble to the
Sounds great.
checklist?
Sure.
So here's our checklist. Before meeting, get present, deep
Right.
breath, feel your feet, close your loops, and get present. It's not about you. I have get present twice. Close your loops. It's not about you. Next item, lead with empathy. Pause and tune in to feelings behind behaviors. You can't override a stress response with cognition. One's nervous system can be overriding strategy. Let's say
So I would say the nervous system can override sort of conscious intentions.
Have total respect for their autonomy. I don't judge. Never argue. Assume positive intent about all their behaviors. Trauma underlies so much of human experiences. Maybe the trauma bit doesn't belong on this checklist item.
Right. It's probably going too deep.
Okay, I'll take that out. Next item, approach with curiosity. Where are they now? How did they get here? What are the barriers to achieving their goal? What skills do they have? Some people just need information. So the bit about just needing information, I don't know if that belongs in this one either. I'm going to take that out. But
Okay.
so we'll finish with what skills do they have? So this is where we're starting to dig deeper, question them. Next is explore
And
deeply.
I would say, what skills do they have comes before what are the barriers to achieving their goals?
Okay, yes. Excellent. Next one is explore deeply. What outcome are they looking for? You will hear unrealistic things. Usually they're not being bold enough. Here is where you may invite them to solve an even bigger problem. Understand the problem from their perspective. What is their understanding of the problem? Use the 5 whys to get at the root causes. Learn how they self-sabotage. Next item, explore solutions. Be slow to give advice. But when you do, you might say something like, I have a different sense of what might be possible, and it may be even better than you are thinking. Never offer advice without asking permission first, and never push. And the final item that I've captured so far is try a simple short-term experiment to overcome their resistance. Make bigger behavior change, but for a shorter period of time.
Yeah. I think let's hold off on that one.
Yeah.
That feels like it's going to be embedded into what we talk about today.
Okay, let's talk.
Okay. So sort of exploring solutions. I say, can we solve a bigger problem? The other thing I would look for is there an opportunity embedded in the problem? So for example, someone wants to lose 20 pounds and the opportunity might be, I actually want to kind of become an athlete, and losing 20 pounds will help me do that. So it's a much more aspirational goal. Right. Or someone's addicted to sugar, and we can explore like why, what's good about the sugar? Well, it helps me with my energy. Or it helps me, let's say I eat it when I'm sad. Right. So then we could say, well, do you want to start exploring other ways to be happy? Other sources of dopamine. And so maybe the sugar is a symptom of, a bad relationship or an unsatisfactory career, or, whatever. So if we can make it about the big thing that they want, it's much easier to get them excited, and it's much easier to move towards something than away from something.
So try to connect their big underlying goal with their
Yeah.
smaller.
I'd say try to identify an opportunity that the problem points to.
Okay. Got it. Okay, try to identify an opportunity that the problem points to.
Or kind of highlights or is a symptom of.
Look for more aspirational goals. Does that belong here? So could the problem be a symptom of something else, right?
Right.
And we kind of captured that earlier when we talked about solving an even bigger problem. Explore deeply, what outcome are they looking for? You will hear unrealistic things.
Yeah, there's a difference between, so the outcome they're looking for is about how do I solve this problem?
Yes.
So essentially think of that as like getting them back to zero. They're in a deficit and they want to get to zero. I want to solve the problem. But in almost every problem, especially ones that they haven't been able to solve, there is an opportunity embedded in it to be even better because of the problem, to use the problem like a slingshot.
Gotcha.
So I'll give you an example. I made a YouTube video about this yesterday. I was finishing my run, and at the top of the hill, walking away from me, was this woman. She lit up a cigarette. So now I've got to, as I jog, I have to smell her cigarette smoke all the way home. And I was like, fuck. And so I thought, well, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try to run up the hill ahead of her. I'm going to try to beat her up the hill. And it was awesome. It was like my first race in a year. And I'm like, can I get to the top of the hill? And I felt great afterwards. Like, and I never would have done that.
Okay. So yeah, like going for the extra wins, right? Like everything's got to be a win-win. And how about pick up another win, right?
Yeah, but it's usually like there's a win. There's an elegant way to find something even better than what you thought you wanted.
Okay.
Right. Like in some of the work you and I have been doing around your business, the problem can lead to, okay, so what I need is real clarity about my mission. Right. That like that's a much bigger thing. That like to get clarity around your mission is huge. It's a big win. And we found it by pulling on the problem of I'm not sure who to talk to next, for example.
Okay.
Right. If I just told you, okay, here's who you should talk to next, you would have missed, if you just solved your problem, you would have missed out on an even bigger solution.
All right. So keeping that wide angle perspective of other opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or even you can ask the question, you ask it to yourself, what's good about this? Right. Do you know the book, The Obstacle is the Way?
No.
It's a good book. It's by Ryan Holiday. It's his modern day thing of Stoic philosophy. So turning trials into triumph. It's just like think of it like weightlifting. Like I got a big fucking weight on the ground, and it's hard to lift, and I wish it wasn't there, but actually lifting it is the way I get stronger.
Okay. Of course.
So I would switch this one with explore solutions. I would put this before it.
Got it.
Because we want to explore the solutions of the new problem.
Ah, yes. So identify what is the fundamental problem you're going after.
Right.
You're not necessarily going after the thing they ask you to go after. Like
right, because they're not excited to go after it, and they feel bad about it, and it's just like, oh, I wish this would go away. So I was coaching somebody yesterday who's like, her weight is out of control, and she's tired of her own cooking. She thinks like, okay, what I've got to do is stop eating cookies and croissants and fun stuff. And like, I want you to help me be more miserable, be miserable more effectively. And so I was asking her, like, what have you tried stuff in the past? What's worked? She says, yes, well, I went vegan overnight, and I was so excited, like all the new things I could do and all the new options and foods I'd never heard of. I'm like, well, why don't we try to get excited about replacing your junk food? Like, how can we gamify it? How can we look for new vegetables and new ways of, using date paste or whatever? How can we turn this into something, a fun and exciting challenge, as opposed to, bleh, help me be more miserable so I can live longer.
Well, I like that when each person comes to you, that what they're going to tell you is the problem isn't necessarily the problem that you really want to solve for them. So find the real problem, identify those extra opportunities, find the problem that's going to get them more wins, perhaps.
Right.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
we get to explore solutions, be slow to give advice, but when you do, I have a different sense of what might be possible. Never offer advice without asking permission first, never push.
Right. So I'd say, like, what, I would begin with, so instead, be slow to give advice. What do I want to do instead? I want to say, so what are some things you might try?
Yep.
I like to go for a multiplicity of options rather than just have them choose the first thing they think of. Because the
Yep.
first thing they think of, they usually thought of already. Right. It's like all that, creativity work. Right. Like only when the group is done brainstorming the obvious 20 things does someone come up with the 21st.
Okay.
Right. And so, that's great. What else can you, and don't evaluate their options. You're saying that's great to the fact that they came up with an option. You're not saying, well, that won't work, or how well with it, right? You just, great. What else might you try? What else comes up here?
Okay.
You can bring them back. So you mentioned, now you're talking about cleaning out your fridge. You mentioned about being an athlete. What are some things you could do to start living, moving towards that identity? So you can, instead of, you're not suggesting things, but you're suggesting domains that they could, aspects of the situation, and say, well, what could you do about this? So you can kind of direct. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. So we're exploring solutions. I like that approach of what are some things you might try. You're going to get a list of things. You think again about the problem from other perspectives. Well, you mentioned you like to be an athlete. What are some things you might try to move in that direction? So getting them to start talking about this menu of changes that they're potentially going to make, right?
Right. Right. Okay. And then, so that's sort of identify options. You can get a bunch of options on the table. And then, so the next step is to have them choose an option or a combination.
Got it. So having laid out this menu, you ask them to pick 1, 2, or 3 things.
Right. What would, and I like to do it as, what's something you'd like to start with, as opposed to, like, because that tells them they don't have to do it all at once.
Okay.
Right. So that's that idea, the last paragraph about, trying something small. So then there's 2 things I like to do in this stage. So with that question of what's, so choose something. What makes sense? What do you want to try? And I want to frame it in terms of try, because we want to make this an experimental process where there's no such thing as failure. There's just more information.
Yes.
There's this whole thing in personal development, like, there is no try. There is just do or not do. Like, what a terrible bar to raise for people who've never succeeded at anything and are terrified of trying anything.
Yeah, that's true.
They're so fucking try.
Yes, there is try, Yoda.
So then what I like to do is stress test it. Right? What could get in your way? Okay, so instead of eating a bowl of Ben and Jerry's in the evening, if I get hungry, I'm going to have carrots, cauliflower with hummus. Great, we got a plan. Let's take, when's the next time you're going to face that situation? Take me there. What could go wrong? What might happen? What are some ways that you can imagine self-sabotaging? So you're not just sending them out into the world saying, great, you've made this decision.
Right.
You're saying, look, this is, let's plan for it. And like contingency planning. Like, what do you, like any business, right? I'm sure you, like medicine was largely about learning contingency plans. Like you're doing this and this happens.
Sure.
Then, now what? So instead of becoming all of a sudden Pollyanna-ish, because right now, like they have a solution, it's so clear, you don't want to leave them there because they're going to walk out of your office, get smacked in the face, and be worse off than before. So brainstorm, and there's a technique called a pre-mortem, which is you can imagine it goes perfectly, Dave. Imagine you want the ice cream and you have the thought and you immediately get up and you pull some cauliflower and broccoli florets from the fridge. And you have some of that and your craving goes away and you feel great. Okay. Now imagine total failure.
Right.
Imagine that you go for the benefit. And then we want to pinpoint the moment of power. Like when in those two scenarios, do you ever see the movie Sliding Doors?
No.
It's a good movie. It's about, basically the plot is the main character, Gwyneth Paltrow before Goop, is trying to catch a subway train. And in one version of the story, she just makes it onto the train. In another version, someone climbing down up the stairs gets in her way and she gets there just as the doors slide shut. And then it goes back and forth, showing the difference in her life based on that moment. So I like to ask, what is the sliding doors moment? Where is the moment where you had the most power to influence the outcome? Was it when you sat down or, and decided, or you got up and went to the fridge instead of the freezer? Like, okay, I'm in front of this box, the freezer's up here, the fridge is down here. Now that's the moment where I need willpower. Or is it while you're sitting on the couch having the thought, and by the time you walk to the fridge, the decision's already been made for you and you have no power, right? Or is it that you didn't go to the store to buy the broccoli and cauliflower? Or is it that it's in big heads and you haven't cut it up and put it in a little Tupperware container so it's convenient? Like help them figure out, like, where's the moment where I have to apply force, right? It's like the elephant in the high heel.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. I really like stress tests and deconstruct. You don't say, okay, go do it. You say, all right, well, what's gonna interrupt your success? What's gonna be a failure? And taking it to an extreme, you say, okay, let's imagine you are a complete failure. Explain how that could have happened. And that's essentially a pre-mortem, right?
Right. And just linguistically, I would never say, imagine you are a complete failure. Say let's imagine that you don't do what you said you were going to do. Imagine the worst that could happen.
Right.
Okay. All right. So then the next step, after we go through that, the next step is you ask them, okay, so remind me what you're going to do. And they're going to say, they're going to repeat it to you. And you say, so how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that you're going to succeed?
Yep.
And if they're honest, they often say 6 or 7. and they'll think that's good enough. All right. Another question I'd like to ask is, would you bet on yourself? Would you bet a painful amount of money that you're going to succeed?
Yep.
And if not, then you say, well, you know what? So I believe that achieving your goal 100% is really important. I don't believe in progress, not perfection. I believe in perfection. But the question is, what's the denominator? So I would rather you say, okay, once a week, I'm going to have crudité instead of Ben and Jerry's, and I can do that. Like, I would rather have 100% compliance with a much weaker plan. Because if it's 100%, you can build on that. If it's 90%, then they're still practicing, these standards don't matter to me. So if they say, I'm 70% sure that I will have the crudité instead of Ben and Jerry's, say, great. So how can we tweak this so that you're at least 95% confident?
Okay, that's interesting. In our lifestyle medicine training for board certification, they recommend we go for about 7 out of 10 confidence level. But you find that going to 9.5 out of 10 confidence level is preferable.
Especially at the beginning. At the beginning, I want people to experience success. And I also want them to know that they don't have to, that people think in very black and white terms. I'm either bad or I'm good. All right? And so the minute they're bad, they're no longer good. And oh, what the hell, I'll just have the whole sleeve of Oreos. All right? As opposed to, who owns this, right? Like if I'm trying to please Dr. Dave, then ultimately I'm being compliant to someone else's wishes. And I either want to impress you, or I'm scared of you, or I want your approval, and eventually that's going to fall apart. So we don't want them to be introjecting our standards. We want them to create their own standards. So the same way you wouldn't say, I promise, I promise to be 70% faithful to my spouse, unless somebody hotter comes along, right? We say, like, this is my plan, and I can make it whatever I want. I can make it, as long as I'm moving in the right direction, I don't have to go for 100%. I don't have to try to win the Olympics. I can take a walk around the block. So we're asking, what are you willing to commit to that's going to move you in the right direction that you would bet on?
Okay. All right. And is that the conclusion? Have we reached the grand?
At that point, when we get to sort of 9 of 10, 9.5, we say, great. So I like them to write it down. So there's no, there's a paper trail. There's no unclarity. Here's what I'm planning to do. And then depending on the relationship, you might say, okay, well, we're going to check in, right? So you're going to, how are you going to keep track of this? How are you going to let me know? Or how are you going to keep track for yourself? Right? So we're asking them to be self-accountable rather than accountable to us. But that might include keeping us in the loop. One of the ways I'm going to be self-accountable is I'm going to send you an email next week, Dr. Dave, and tell you how I did. Great. By when will I receive it? And, and specificity is our friend.
Right. So the SMART goals, right? Measurable, time delimited.
Yep.
Very specific.
Right. Like, you ever wait for an airplane to take off and you're in the, you're in the terminal, and like the time comes and goes when you should have boarded and they don't say anything and you get really agitated, versus they say, okay, there's been a 20-minute delay. We apologize. We need to fix the jetway. We'll board you in 20 minutes. They can keep doing that for hours. As long as they keep you in the loop, you'll be much less agitated. I'm really sorry, folks. We can't find the part. We're going to have to, as long as they keep telling you, we're cool. So the specificity is really, really important so that people feel it's a very calming thing to feel like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do and exactly how I'm going to keep
Yep.
track of it. And that way, you know where you are.
And you know because you've stated it, you've deconstructed it, you've stress tested it, you've written it down, and you've made a plan for when to check back.
Right.
All right.
And
And then you
right.
just iterate on some of
Yep.
these
And
later.
and I would leave them with, look, we've created a hypothesis and we've made it as good as we can make it. But now you're going to do the test. You're going to perform the experiment. And the goal of that experiment is data. So if it turns out that what we've come up with doesn't work, that's fine, because we're just going to keep repeating the process until it does work. Right? Because I want them to have a growth mindset about this whole thing.
Got it. I love it.
Yeah. Look at us, 29 minutes and 32 seconds.
Howie, you amaze me as always. I greatly appreciate this. I think this is a really powerful checklist. I can imagine how a little bit of training for clinicians like myself on this with some practicing and just sort of running through it, just a few hours of that. And most clinicians, doctors, other providers would be much better versed to deliver this kind of experience.
Well, I would love to teach this. So if you have ways of or ideas about how I can, I don't know, create a 6 CME credit course in a few hours and practice and feedback, I would love to do that.
Yeah, I think the world needs this. So let's make that a yes and figure out how and when it happens. But for now, I'm going to take this, wordsmith it a little bit, and run it by you. I'm going to look for some scientific evidence behind this. I know that there's some quote unquote hard science behind a number of the things that we've discussed. I know a lot of this is your own art, right?
Right, but it's science based.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely
it's social science, which means somebody got a bunch of undergrads to do something a few times.
You can find papers. You can fill up a list of references.
So as long as it's like, if your target market is white, Western, upper middle class English speakers in the 18 to 25 age range, I think we can assume that we can generalize that to every human on Earth.
That same group who gets studied in almost every study out there. And then the other thing is visuals. And so I do like to try to put visuals together for this, and even put it together into a printable checklist or even a poster, which is something we do on our website, healthrules.org. So I don't know if any ideas come to you regarding that. I'm certainly welcome to it, Howie. But I'll get back to you with what I've produced. And the plan is to put this up on the website and to publish our interview here to document how we created it. And so on behalf of the rest of the world, I want to thank you, Howie, for helping divulge all your secrets in this marvelous checklist.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dave. It's my pleasure. And thank you for so skillfully drawing it out of me. You're a checklist master, because for me, it's like a tornado. And you've helped me see it in a very linear fashion, which makes it much more teachable.
So this is coming from you, my mentor, one of the most gifted interviewers out there. I can attest through the Plant Yourself podcast and hundreds of hours that you've given the world. So thank you. That means a lot. And so we'll let you get back to your life, Howie. And so until the next time I have the great fortune of chatting with you, I will bid you peace.
Peace, Dave. Be well.
Be well.